Elias Holt ran along the riverbank, eyes scanning quickly, then he saw her. A tall woman, thrashing in the current, arms flailing wildly. Muscles rippled beneath her skin, but she was exhausted, her hand slipping from a rotting branch. Without thinking, Elias threw off his hat and dove into the water. The cold hit him like a blade, spinning him in the current. He swam with everything he had, grabbing hold of her shoulder. A powerful kick nearly dragged them both under, but Elias shouted, "Stop it! Let me pull you in." She froze, staring at him with wide, dark eyes. With one final stroke, Elias dragged them both to the shore, soaked to the bone, heart pounding like a drum. The woman rolled to her side, gasping for breath. In the fading light, Elias saw the red welts on her wrists from rope burns, bruises running down her arms. She was not just someone who had nearly drowned, she was someone running from something. Elias stood, breathing hard, water dripping from his shirt. The woman pushed herself upright, broad-shouldered, chest heaving. Her eyes held no fear, only the wild readiness of an animal that would still bite if cornered. "Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice rough. She said nothing, just stared at him, jaw clenched. Then slowly, she gave a single nod, as if accepting something unspoken. "All right," Elias said, gesturing toward the ranch on the hill. "Let's go unless you want the wolves to eat you alive." Elias walked ahead, each step leaving a trail of mud on the sloping dirt road up the hill. The woman followed behind, soaking wet, her black hair heavy and clumped into dripping strands. Neither of them spoke, only the squelch of mud beneath their boots and the chorus of frogs by the riverbank broke the silence. When they reached the cabin, Elias opened the door and stepped aside, letting her go in first. The room was dark and small, with nothing but a wooden bed, an old dining table, and a cold stove. He tossed a bundle of firewood into the hearth and lit a flame. Warm orange light slowly spread, casting shadows across her face. It was the first time Elias got a proper look at her. She was nearly his height, with broad shoulders and the solid build of a fighter. Her sun-bronzed skin was marked with scars and bruises. A fresh cut on her cheek had dried dark. Her deep black eyes held fire fierce, unyielding. "Sit by the fire before you freeze to death," Elias said, his voice as steady and low as ever. She did not move at first, but after a few breaths, she stepped forward and crouched near the hearth, holding her calloused hands out to catch the warmth. Elias hung his wet coat on a wooden hook, then brought her a blanket. "Wrap this around you. No one needs to die from a cold." She took it without a word of thanks, pulling it around her shoulders. Smoke and sweat mixed in the tight space. Elias realized the cabin had never felt this small before. He boiled water, dropped in a few dry tea leaves, and set the cup in front of her. "Drink." She stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up and took a sip. For the first time, the tension in her eyes eased just a little. Elias pulled a chair across from her and sat down, one hand resting near the revolver on his hip. "My name is Elias Holt. This is my land. If you plan on staying the night, I should at least know your name." A pause. The fire crackled. Then finally, she spoke, her voice rough but steady. "Sana." Elias nodded. "All right, Sana. Tonight, you stay here. I will sleep on the porch." He stood, added another log to the fire, then stepped to the door. Before closing it, he glanced back. Sana was still there, unmoving. Her shadow stretched across the floor like a proud statue carved from stone. That night, Elias lay on a bench outside, his rifle resting across his lap. The wind blew cold, and chimney smoke curled through the air. He did not sleep right away. His eyes stayed open, listening to every sound inside the cabin. Like a man who had just brought a storm into his home, morning light poured through the window, waking Elias. He sat up, ears catching a strange sound from the yard. It was not the wind. It was not the lowing of cattle. He grabbed his Winchester and stepped outside. In front of him, Sana was hauling up buckets of water from the well, her arms flexing in the early Sunday. Her wet black hair hung loose, droplets falling onto her shoulders. She said nothing, simply carried the water over to the trough beside the stable. Elias leaned against the porch post, not interfering. The sight held him there longer than usual. This was no longer the exhausted girl from last night, but a warrior, working like the land already belonged to her. After watering, Sana circled around back to clean up a pile of damp straw. The sound of her shovel mixed with the snorts of horses, Not long after, Elias saw her open the gate and release the cattle into the pasture, her movements quick and sure, like someone who had done it many times before. When the sun climbed higher, Elias brought out some hard bread and a jug of water, placing them on the porch steps. Santa paused, glanced at him briefly. Neither of them spoke. They simply exchanged a nod, a silent agreement. That afternoon, Elias walked along the fence line. Santa followed, carrying a hammer and coil of wire. Together, they fixed broken posts. Sweat ran down her back in streaks, her leather shirt clinging to old scars. After a while, Elias finally spoke. "You do not plan on leaving, do you?" Santa stopped, driving the hammer into the dirt. "Not unless you send me away. Out there, all I have are people hunting me. At least here, there is water and a roof." Elias stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "Then stay. But if anyone comes looking, you had better be ready to fight." Something flashed in Sana's eyes, not fear, but something that looked like being granted power. "I have been fighting my whole life. The only difference is, this time I will not fight alone." That night, Elias left a clean blanket outside the cabin door. In the morning, it was folded neatly, left on the steps clean and dry. No thank you was spoken, but Elias smiled to himself. He knew a thread had been tied between them, invisible but firm. The afternoon was sweltering, the desert wind scorching their faces. Elias was checking the eastern fence line when a sharp smell of smoke hit his nose. He turned just ahead. A thin ribbon of smoke curled up from the dry grass field. "Damn it," he muttered, and took off running. By the time Elias galloped back into the yard, Sana was already there. She had smelled the smoke too, her dark eyes locked on the flames spreading fast across the brittle grass. Without waiting for a word, she grabbed a bucket and began drawing water from the well. "Drive the cattle to the open ground up north," Elias shouted, rushing toward the pen gate. Sana ran after him, flung the gate open, and cracked a rope to push the herd forward. The cattle panicked, but slowly began moving in the right direction. The fire spread faster than the wind. The grass crackled and hissed, smoke turning the sky to haze. Elias grabbed a shovel. Sana took a tree branch. Together they beat back the flames, trying to stop them from reaching the fence line. Sweat streamed down their faces, soot and ash clinging to their skin. Sana coughed hard, but never stopped swinging. In the firelight, the muscles in her shoulders and arms glistened, casting long shadows on the charred earth. A stray ember landed on Elias's shirt. Sana lunged forward, slapped it out before it could burn through. They stood there, both gasping for breath, staring at each other through the smoke. Not a word passed between them, but their eyes said everything. They had just saved each other and saved the ranch. When the fire was finally out, they collapsed onto the porch steps, soaked in sweat and streaked with ash. The sky blazed with sunset, smoke still rising from scorched patches in the distance. Elias uncorked the water flask and handed it to Sana. She took it, drank deep, and passed it back. A faint smile crossed her sun-worn face, the first smile since she had arrived. "Tomorrow, we need to rebuild the fence," Elias said, his voice raw. Sana nodded. "And I will help you." For the first time, Elias felt those words were not just a promise but a decision to stay. "I am truly grateful for your presence here." If this story brought back old memories, dusty sunsets, and the sound of hoofbeats echoing in your heart, then subscribe to my channel, so that every day we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another tale from the West. That evening, the sunset cast golden light across the field. Elias and Sana worked side by side, repairing the fence scorched by the fire the day before. Sweat rolled down their backs, dirt clung to their hands. Elias drove the posts, Sana pulled the wire. Whenever the tension got too tight, they had to brace it together, shoulder to shoulder. When the last post was in place, Elias peeled off his gloves and rolled his wrist. A rope snap had left a welt across the back of his hand, and it was bleeding. Sana stepped over and took his hand. Her rough fingers were unexpectedly gentle. "Does it hurt?" she asked. Her voice was low, but for the first time, there was a trace of warmth in it. Elias hesitated. Since the day he lost his wife and children, no one had touched him like that. "It is fine," he said softly, but he did not pull his hand away. The moment lingered, longer than a blink. They looked at each other beneath the burning light of dusk, Sana's hair tangled in the wind. That night, after the cattle were brought in, Elias lit a fire inside the cabin. Sana sat nearby, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The firelight danced across her sun-kissed face, revealing every scar and making her dark eyes shimmer. "Tomorrow, I will finish patching the stable roof," Sana said calmly. "You do not have to do it alone." Elias gave a faint smile, rare for him. "I have gotten used to doing things alone, but having someone help is not so bad." Silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of burning wood. Sana lifted her head and caught Elias's gaze. It was no longer guarded like the first day, but steady, deep, like a well. No words were spoken, but the space between them closed slowly. Elias leaned forward, and when the fire flared, their first kiss came soft, unhurried, as if it had been waiting there all along. Sana did not pull away. Instead, she placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, feeling something she had not known in a long time: safety. When they parted, the cabin remained quiet, but that quiet no longer felt heavy. Elias stood and tossed another log into the stove. Sana sat still, her fingers brushing her lips, as if to hold on to the moment a little longer. That night, Elias slept soundly for the first time in years, and Sana, instead of sleeping on the porch, curled up near the hearth. The little cabin felt warmer, as if a new heart had begun to beat inside it. The next morning, the prairie lay beneath a blanket of fog. Elias had just opened the gate to the pen when he heard hoofbeats, steady, heavy, like drums from afar. He rushed up to the porch, hand gripping his Winchester. Sana stepped out from the stable, her face turning grim. From the mist, a group of 6 Apache warriors emerged, their horses stopping in a line at the edge of the yard. They were tall, their bodies painted in red and black, eyes sharp as blades. The youngest, with a scar across his cheek, shouted something in Apache. Sana responded, her voice clear and firm. Elias did not understand the words, but he saw the tension in Sana's face as she slowly unwrapped the blanket from her shoulders, revealing sun-darkened skin and a long scar down her back. The eldest among them stepped forward and spoke in rough English. "She is one of ours. She must return. She is to be the wife of the chief's son, as was decided." Sana stood tall, her bare shoulders steady, eyes bright like drawn steel. "I will not go back," she said. "I choose freedom." The air thickened like smoke. The younger warrior snarled and grabbed his spear, ready to charge. Elias raised his Winchester, leveled it. "She stays," he said, voice low and unshaking. "This is my land." A hot wind blew through, rustling the dry grass. Both sides held still, like frozen statues. Then the elder raised his hand. The younger warrior lowered his spear, though his eyes still burned with fury. The old man locked eyes with Elias and spoke slowly. "We will hold council under the full moon. Then, her fate and yours will be decided." They turned their horses and rode off, hoofbeats fading into the mist, leaving behind a heavy silence. Elias lowered his rifle and turned to look at Sana. She stood still, her shoulders rising and falling with each breath. "They will come back," she said softly. Elias nodded. "Then we will be ready." That afternoon, they reinforced the windows, stacked sandbags around the shooting holes. Elias laid out ammunition on the table. Sana sharpened a knife, tightened the shaft on a new spear. As the sun sank low, they sat together in silence. Only the sound of wind and the beat of their hearts filled the air, both knowing that when the full moon rose, everything would be decided. The night before the full moon, the sky was black as ink. The cabin was silent, save for the crackle of wood in the stove. Sana sat by the fire, staring deep into the flickering flame. Elias stepped out from the storage room, holding an old bandage, one he had used years ago, a scar from a fire long past. He placed it on the table and sat across from her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Sana stayed silent for a long time before finally speaking. "If I stay, they will see you as someone who defied the laws of the tribe. They might take your land. They might take your life." Elias looked straight at her, his voice rough, but steady. "I have already lost everything once. This land, this life. They mean nothing if I have to let you go just to save them." Sana clenched her fists, tendons visible beneath the skin. "I do not want you to bleed for me." Elias leaned forward, his voice lowering like a vow. "This is not for you. It is for me. If you leave, I go back to being a ghost alone out here on the prairie. I cannot survive that again." The silence stretched. Sana looked into his gray eyes and saw no longer the cold of loneliness but fire. A fire that would burn to the end. The next morning, they rode out together to the gathering place of the tribal council. The prairie seemed to hold its breath. A great circle of fire burned at the center of the clearing. The elder stood at its heart, holding a ceremonial staff. Sana stepped into the circle first, her head held high. She declared in Apache that she had chosen her own path. Some warriors murmured. A few shook their heads. Then Elias stepped into the firelight. He had left his rifle at the edge. His footsteps were heavy, like stone. He stopped beside Sana and faced the elder. I choose to stand with her. Under this moon, before the spirits and before the tribe, I take her as my partner. The wind howled across the grassland, fanning the flames high. The elder looked at them both for a long time, then slowly nodded. Then let the spirits bear witness. From this day forward, she is yours. But know this, there is no taking it back. Sana turned to Elias, her dark eyes glowing with something fierce and trembling all at once. She said nothing, just placed her calloused hand over his. In that moment, under the full moon, they were no longer the protector and the one protected. They had become a vow, one life, chosen against all odds. The next morning, a thin veil of mist blanketed the prairie. Elias and Sana rode back to the cabin in silence, no longer heavy, but calm. Each hoofbeat felt like it stamped a seal on a new beginning. When they reached the ranch, Elias halted at the gate, gazing at the old gray cabin. It had stood through storms and endless lonely nights, and now it seemed to breathe again. Sana dismounted first, her broad shoulders catching the full glow of morning light. In the days that followed, they worked without pause. Sana helped Elias rebuild the fence, each wooden post driven deep into the earth. She carried water from the well, her muscles flexing beneath the midday sunday. Every swing of the hammer, every loop of wire, declared her presence here. Elias added new windows, chopped wood, began framing a new stable. One afternoon, they led the cattle back together. The sun set behind them, casting long shadows across the scorched field. Elias turned and saw Sana smile, a rare smile, warm as a quiet promise. That night by the fire, Elias stirred a pot of beans. Sana sat close, her dark hair falling across half her face. He handed her an old ceramic cup, and when their hands touched, they said nothing. They did not need to. The cabin was no longer just shelter, it was a home. Spring came. The first green shoots pushed through the earth, covering the old burn marks. Elias replanted the garden. Sana released the horses into open pasture, their whinnies echoing in the distance. There was no more running, no more fear of shadows. One evening, Elias stood on the porch, watching the sky blaze red. Sana stepped beside him, leaned into his shoulder. They said nothing, listening only to the breeze rustling through the grass. At last, Elias whispered, "This house is no longer empty." Sana tilted her head, her dark eyes shining in the twilight. "And I am no longer alone." They stood there until night fell. The fire inside cast golden light through the cabin window like a beacon, saying two lost souls had finally found where they belonged. My friend, freedom is choosing who stands beside you when the storm comes. And when two lost souls choose each other, even the wildest land becomes a home, and a home is something worth protecting with your last breath. A man who dares to save another, knowing it might bring trouble. A woman who dares to trust again, after being betrayed. Love is born in these quiet choices, unyielding, patient, stronger than any storm, and worth guarding to the very end. I wish you a truly beautiful and happy day. I love you all, my dear audience of Wild West storytelling. Let me know how you felt about this story. Leave a comment below. Type Ana if you enjoyed it. And do not forget to subscribe channel to catch more thrilling tales from the Wild West.